Hello and welcome. My name is Melanie St. Ange, and joining me today is Taya DeAngelis and Rachel Schultz. Today we're going to be talking about ABC Technology Supplier Data Analysis Project. To begin our literature review, ABC Technology is a business-to-business wholesalers of laptops and computer accessories operating out of Toronto. With the entire world shifting to online, the technology suppliers of the world are required to accommodate the massive influx of demand. It is reported that companies have focused on current product offerings and customer satisfaction rather than the product development to handle these high levels of customer retention. This trend has no indication of declining. Therefore, ABC must determine internal deficiencies. It is crucial to consider both already existing customers as well as future potential customers by remaining innovative, adaptive, and tailoring to any sort of improvements. It is to satisfy the greatest number of consumers, there is a need to focus on the following. What is currently making customers satisfied, and why are unsatisfied customers not feeling fulfilled at ABC? With that being said, let's transition into our research questions. There are multiple factors that can influence the success of operations of a business. However, it could be said that success is reflective upon your consumer base, and thus overall satisfaction of the consumers themselves. The research concerning the above statement revolves around discovering what influences these factors and how ABC can maintain and improve upon them. Therefore, the research questions to be determined by the findings are: how can ABC satisfy consumers' wants and needs by understanding what factors are most important to consumers, and how this overall customer satisfaction rate affects the future operations of ABC? Now, this question is broad, so it can be broken down into multiple different subset questions to ensure that the research is accurate. Being proactive thinkers allowed for broadness of research questions to be impactful. We need to ask ourselves, are the provided components substantial enough to show prominent relationships between variables? Is the data mining team cross-referencing the appropriate variables to pinpoint ABC's deficiencies and exceptionalities? More specifically, would advanced technical support allow ABC to retain customers at a faster pace? Does ABC's product line endorse outdated technology that in turn require additional warranty? Does advertising ABC's corporate culture promote customer satisfaction over advertising brand deals with partnering companies? This proactive thought process allows for an in-depth examination of feedback across multiple platforms to provide high-level management with accurate, reliable statistical information to form an action plan for improvement.
There were multiple steps implemented in order to create, build, and develop the dataset and its outputs. The first step was to define and understand the variables that were given. To be able to use and create certain data mining functions, such as regression models and different types of graphs, it was essential to interpret which variables were categorical and which were quantitative data inputs. We concluded that all binary variables, for example variables x1 to x5, were categorical or controlled, while the infinite variables, such as x6 to x18, were quantitative. From this information, we knew that the quantitative data could be split into groups of common variables that would generate an intricate data inquiry. Before the data could be grouped using a principal component analysis, there was missing data within the survey that needed to be determined, since most algorithms cannot process data with missing values. Each column that had missing values was found using the imputation mean-median method. If skewed, then the median was found. If symmetrical, the mean was found. Once the column was sorted from lowest to highest, the median and average were calculated depending on the situation, and missing values were found. These values were then plugged into the original data to have a completely filled out data. Now that these issues with the data were resolved, we were left to determine which techniques and tools we were to use in order to compile relevant data and information for our report and analysis. Certain functions that we concluded would give us the greatest amount of information and outputs included regressions, multiple and logistics, as well as principal component analysis, a heat map, different graphs, data partitioner, and more. Once the pre-processing of the dataset was fully analyzed and finished, we began to work on implementing these functions into our dataset to create and complete our survey. This gave us a better understanding of our findings, so we could ultimately propose different recommendations on how ABC can improve their business customer satisfaction.
The findings from the exploratory data analysis allowed us to determine cause and effect relationships between the variables, as well as finding meaningful correlations and patterns within our regression model and graphs. To begin, the findings from the line graph displaying average future purchases and customer type has determined that the longer a customer has been with ABC, the higher predicted purchases that customer will have. Given that purchases are usually a day-to-day incentive of a business, this graph is especially useful in forecasting the predicaments of how transactional data is affected in ABC's future. Next, we have a graph that visualizes the percent of ABC's current purchases by recommendations. So here we can see that there is a weak but positive linear relationship between the two variables, which also means that the two can affect one another. However, we can also determine the strength of the relationship between these two variables by analyzing the R-squared value of 0.320, which again indicates that there is a modern relationship. This means that recommendations somewhat influence ABC's current purchases. Next, we have the percent of current purchases by customer type. The R-square value from this data set indicates that the percent of current purchases are affected by the customer type by 63.7%. With customer types being representative of the length of time a customer has been purchasing from ABC, research also proves that customers with the longest serving purchase history make up a higher percentage of current sales, whereas customers with the lowest serving purchase history compile the lowest percentage of current sales.
Here we have the principal component analysis. Through the compression of the variables given to us, we were able to create a principal component analysis, otherwise known as the PCA. The PCA alters the original values of the data set into weighted averages that provide most of the original information in less variables. The new variables, otherwise referred to as the principal components, that were created through the PCA are the linear combinations of the original variables. The variables we chose to conduct our PCA were all of the quantitative data because we wanted to conclude which variables correlated best. The PCA created a new set of predictors for our data set. When creating the outcome, we selected the smallest number of components explaining 90% of the variance. We ended up with all 7 components, which output the linear combination of the variables chosen. We chose all 7 components because our cutoff was 90% and the cumulative variance percent of 90 was satisfied with all 7 components.
Next, we have the relationships within our heat map. The heat map allowed us to determine the relationships of the variables with the lowest and highest correlations. We were able to understand what factors were influencing satisfaction in both a positive and negative way. The 2 variables which the heat map indicates have the strongest correlation with one another are X9, complaint resolution, and X19, overall customer satisfaction. These 2 variables have a strong positive relationship of 0.78, thus demonstrating a meaningful insight that the 2 strongly affect one another. Contrasting this, the 2 variables with the lowest correlation are X11, product line, and X13, competitive pricing. The negative relationship between these 2 variables have the lowest correlation between one another. That is, that a change in one of the 2 variables will not affect a change in the other whatsoever.
Multiple R shows a strong linear relationship because of the variation of our dependent Y values. R squared output is about 80%, which represents the response variation. The percentile is very high, which represents our model fits approximately 80% of our overall data. Our model accounts for approximately 79% of our total variability as it adjusts to the complexity of the outputs.
Next, we have the predictive analysis, which will help us to understand how these different relationships are going to affect ABC's future practices. The goals of the data mining is to determine, on behalf of ABC, the factors that affect the overall level of customer satisfaction and how this satisfaction will affect ABC's future business practices. It is important to understand what is causing fluctuations or uncertainties in ABC's customer satisfaction because it will not only assist in the correction of these errors, but influence the future of ABC as well. Thus, ABC must be able to interpret the future advantages that can be provided due to a strong customer satisfaction rate. Proving a cause and effect relationship between the variables provided and overall customer satisfaction would best assist ABC in interpreting what aspects of their business provide a direct correlation with overall customer satisfaction levels. Multiple linear regression between recommendations, satisfaction, and future partnerships. These variables have been chosen due to the fact that a recommendation can leave either a positive or negative impact on an individual who could be a potential customer. Therefore, if a current customer is not satisfied, a good recommendation will be lost, which affects future sales and thus future business incentives. In most cases, future partnerships rely on the ability for a business to efficiently execute incentives. The multiple R value of 0.7323 indicates that there is a moderate positive relationship between the predictors. However, the R-square value holds a value of 0.53. Explained as a percentage, the R-square value indicates that about 53% of the variances are explained by the model. This depicts a moderate relationship. And although this relationship may be moderate, it must be considered that there are only 3 variables. Again, customer satisfaction, recommendations, and future partnerships in this regression model. Thus, the value is still meaningful to ABC as it can be predicted that 53% of their future endeavors can be explained by the probability that a partnership or recommendation occurs due to this high satisfaction, which is more than half. When it comes to the accuracy of this model, we justify that the prediction itself is accurate by observing the standard error of 0.33. This indicates that ABC can trust the information provided by the prediction regression model. The higher the standard error, the higher chance there is for random errors in the statistical data of the regression model to occur. With this being said, 0.33 is a fairly low standard error. Fortunately, the data provided by this regression model can be deemed useful. This is not only due to the standard error as previously mentioned, but due to the data cleaning practices implemented throughout the formulation of the report. Duplicate data and missing data were manipulated in order to increase the overall accuracy of statistical results. Thus, the trends and conclusions drawn from the regression model can assist ABC in predicting future outcomes and the cause and effect relationships these variables have on one another.
One issue when fitting a model is how well the newly created model behaves when applied to new data. In order to address this issue, we divided the dataset into multiple partitions. It was important to partition the data we were observing for 2 main reasons. One was to improve scalability. This is because when you divide data across multiple partitions, each hosted on a separate server, you can scale out the system almost indefinitely. And the other reason was to improve performance. So when it was done correctly, partitioning can make the system more efficient. The operations that affect more than one partition will run more effectively. Training set is used to train or build the model. After fitting the model on the training set, the performance of the model can be tested on the validation set. We chose the default settings of the training set to 60%. This means that 60% of the total observations were randomly selected for the training set. In other words, each observation has a 60% chance of being selected. We concluded that 120 observations were assigned to the training set. Once a model is built using the training set, the performance of the model must be validated using new data. If the training set itself was utilized to compute accuracy, the result would be an overly optimistic estimate of the accuracy of the model. This is because the training or model fitting process ensures that the accuracy of the model for the training data is as high as possible, and the model is specifically suited to the training data. We set validation to 40%, which resulted in 80 observations assigned to the validation set.
Within any large or small-scale corporation, internal operations and product offerings can always be improved upon when analyzing historical information. With regards to ABC specifically, majority of the customers reported above average satisfaction, and those individuals had been with ABC for longer than 1 year. So how can ABC look more appealing to new customers? We propose that ABC should implement new incentives that promote buying quickly. ABC needs to retain new customers at a higher degree to present new initiatives that benefit new customers. To gain new revenue is important for the company. However, customer retention allows for stable revenue while forming loyal employee-customer relations. ABC's limitations lie within their current selling market as they are a profit and non-for-profit organization. Because of that fact, it would be hard to accommodate their deficiencies in e-commerce, sales force, reliability, and product line when they need to accommodate such a large consumer base. My group members and I would like to thank you for listening to our presentation on ABC Technology Data Analytic Project.